because you're a single woman, and as soon as the sun sets, if anybody comes there, it's going to be gossip. That's a little bitty town. So, because she was, already in my town today, and I figured, that's a good place to stay. We don't need any unnecessary
At one
gossip.
time, she was going to build a house there.
She had initially said she was going to do that, I know. And
What's it been, 2 years?
something like that, yeah. So, but I done told her, I said, chancellors will stay on average a couple, 3 years, and I'm glad we've got you for as long as we have,
She went back to Texas, or?
I believe it is a Texas university she's going to. So, and I said, I'd much rather have someone that's top notch for a couple of years than whom we wish we could get rid of.
Going to do another search, or?
Yeah, we're going to have to do another search. Yeah, we may be a feeder university.
Well, it's one of the things you get unless you got somebody got some local ties or something.
Yeah. But as long as we can, get some really top-notch folks, and hey, maybe they'll move up like here or whatever, but we need a place with some main campus. So, I wasn't disappointed in that, we've had her at least a couple of years, and she has done positive things. So,
Renee's not going to be the rest of this.
I don't think Renee's going to apply for the position. She would be fine.
I told her last time, I said, why don't you rethink that? I mean, all it's going to do is everybody likes you already.
Yeah.
Boost your retirement.
Yeah, that's true. And she's not planning on staying that much longer anyway. I would have.
Her husband was having some health problems.
Yeah, her husband is quite ill.
I think she's a little worried about that.
Yeah, but the job she's doing, I think if she took the chancellor's position, she'd have less to do. She is really working her butt off. And I'm really, I would actually really encourage you at a certain point.
It's a great little campus. Hope they find somebody good.
Yep. Well, you were excellent. I can tell you.
I enjoyed it over there, actually.
Yeah. Well, a lot of faculty told me, boy, I wish we could clone him.
now come to order. Mr. Drotti, can you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Williams.
Present.
Ms. Warner.
Present.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Lockett.
Here.
Mr. Armature.
Here.
Mr. Chatelain.
Here.
Mr. Mallett.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Yarborough.
Here.
Mr. Blossman. Mrs. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Damp.
Here.
Mr. Starnes.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. It's my understanding that there are no individuals registered for public comment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, can you please convene the Academic Affairs Committee meeting?
Yes, sir, I will. Mr. Roddy, would you call roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Lockett.
Here.
Mr. Armature.
Here.
Mr. Chatelain.
Here.
Mr. Mallett.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Yarborough.
Here.
Mr. Blossman. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Very good. Dr. Haney, would you present the items for consideration?
Yes, the first item is a request for a 5-year renewal for the LSU Ethics Institute. And this would provide a full approval for the institute, both from this board, and then it will be forwarded to the Board of Regents as well. The Board of Supervisors approved this last year. The Ethics Institute has had an incredibly active year under the directorship of Cecil Eubanks. Dr. Eubanks is an iconic, beloved professor of political science focused on theory and philosophy, and he has done a phenomenal job this year in truly transforming this institute. It has multiple focus areas and significantly focusing on infusing ethics into the curriculum of our students. And this summer, the Ethics Institute hosted 11 faculty who attended with a small development grant. And as a result of the workshop over the summer, the faculty included an ethics component in the curriculum, and currently there are 337 undergraduate students and 52 graduate students who are enrolled this fall in classes that will have an ethics focus. And the idea is not for a student simply to take an ethics course that is required by a number of accrediting bodies. We believe in our new integrative core, ethics will be a component of our undergraduate curriculum, but that they'll be getting this focus on the ethics in whatever the discipline is. So if you're a student in biology, what are the ethics surrounding those issues? If you're in agriculture, what are the ethics surrounding those issues? Political science, media, whatever that may be. So we're very excited about that. We are also working to build a program K-12 with the Ethics Institute, so that we'll be working to begin from the 4th grade level forward to develop toolkits for K-12 teachers. And we also are looking to have this spring a conference focused on compliance and athletics and partnering with the SEC for that. So we're very excited about that. And in addition, we have a focus on supporting students through a variety of programming, one of which will be a fellowship to support students who will develop digital ethical games. And we also will be having a competition of sorts, but it will really focus on exemplary ethical conduct among our students. We tend to forget that the vast majority of our students are amazing. We tend to focus on the singular incidents, so trying to highlight those students who make those ethical choices. And then we also, of course, will have speakers coming to campus to highlight the importance of that. We also are focused on research that helps economic development and creation of wealth, which of course needs to be accompanied by finest practices and ethical compliance. If you think about years back, the Enron scandal, or more recently, the Wells Fargo or the Volkswagen emissions scandal, we had 2 of those in our family. So focusing on research about how do you develop that moral and ethical behavior among individuals. And lastly, just to speak a little bit about the resources behind this, we have successfully raised $64,000 with both individual supporters as well as a gift from Tyson Foods. And we are also in conversations with other businesses who have interests in ensuring that our students who become their employees have this type of ethical training. And we are also continuing to work with our own graduates who have gone on to have positions in compliance in industry, who are interested in working with us, as well as one of our graduates whose entire law practice is around that. One of his partners is Walmart, so he's very excited about working with us. So we're thrilled with the work of the Institute over the past year. It is currently housed in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, but it is truly a university-wide program that we are very thrilled about its process. So we are hoping to see that approved and renewed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Haney. That was a great presentation, and I think you covered most of the items. Anybody have any questions? We need a motion to approve.
I move. I'll second that motion and just applaud the efforts. I think it's a great initiative for us.
That was good. I think it's a great program. We got a motion and a second to approve that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Dr. Haney, you going to do the consent agenda item?
Yes, there are just a few programs. You'll see there from LSU Alexandria, 4 post-baccalaureate certificates for practitioner teacher programs to move individuals along to teacher certification, and also a request for a letter of intent for a Master of Science in Sport Management from LSU A&M. And then we also have 2 requests for posthumous degrees to be awarded to Adam Dowse, who was a student who tragically passed. He was a student at the Law Center, and John Bell, who was a computer science student who tragically passed in his last semester at the LSU Shreveport.
Any questions of Dr. Haney? Okay, how about a motion to approve?
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn the academic committee.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the work of the academic committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Chatelain, would you please convene the Finance Committee?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Drotti, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chatelain.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Lockett.
Here.
Mr. Mallett. Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Werner. Ms. Werner.
Here.
Mr. Yarborough.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first will be an update and then 1 action item. But we want to kind of have an update on our supplier diversity program and how we are progressing. So, not sure who is doing that for us this morning. Sally. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Happy to be back here and giving you an update about the Supplier Diversity Program. The position for the Supplier Diversity Manager has been posted, and we're working with Human Resources to set up candidate interviews at this point. In the interim, I'd like to introduce you to Tiffany Robinson. Tiffany's a 10-year employee with LSU, and she's a business development manager. We've repositioned Tiffany to help out with the program so that we can ensure the program continues moving forward as quickly as we can. Also, we have Devon with us. Devon isn't feeling well, so I've asked her to stay in her seat away from us. So along with the PowerPoint today, we've provided an update with additional details that is in your packet. The details include policies and procedure changes that we've done, reporting calendar for spend, highlights of other meetings and events that we've done. So, we've done several doing business with LSU supplier meetings. What we did in the past was we were having individual meetings with suppliers, and we weren't reaching enough suppliers. They were each 30-minute meetings, and there were challenges with that. So we changed the format. Now we're doing larger meetings, and we've had on the average of 3 or 4 suppliers that come in at one time. We walk them through registering with in LSU's database. We work with them on developing their business profile, and we also show them how to register for LAPAC to get bid opportunities that are out there. Some of our resource meetings have been very successful in the last month. We've met with the New Orleans Black Chamber with Kalisha Garrett, and we talked with Kalisha about how do we engage with the Black Chamber and some of her clients in debriefing when a supplier does not get a bid, showing them the bid tabulation forms and trying to walk them through where they had challenges in getting the information they needed to be successful in their bids. We've met with other suppliers, and there's information in your packet about this, with other resource partners. LED will share trainings at our construction event that we're doing in January, and they're going to be doing training on bonding for construction suppliers. We've also, Baton Rouge Area Chamber of Commerce, met with Chandra Williams and also Michael, I can't say Michael's last name. He's the executive director there. And we talked about, there's the Exxon is working with the Baton Rouge Area Chamber as an anchor for a minority development resource center in North Baton Rouge. That is also tied to LSU Small Business Development Center, which is just is having their ribbon cutting actually this morning. So we're hoping to be able to partner and collaborate with folks like that, so that because we're not able to provide all of the resources our suppliers need to grow and develop and get more business, we're hoping to connect them with some of those resources. And we do that through the networking that we're doing. We've done a lot of really good resource meetings, and like I said, there's a summary in your packet. I won't go into all of the details.
So, as part of our activities and initiatives so far, we wanted to highlight some of our testimonials or feedback that we've received from various suppliers about some of our initiatives. And here you'll see a highlight of a statement that we received from Picture Perfect Painting, who was a vendor who attended our Supplier Expo. And while they were not immediately receiving a contract from LSU, it was through their attendance at the expo and contacts that they made that they have obtained a 5-figure contract with the city of Baton Rouge. So,
I'm sorry, excuse me, I just want to be clear. This is not a contract with the quote you have here.
Mm-hmm. The contract is with the city of Baton Rouge.
Not in LSU.
Not at LSU.
Okay.
However, their attendance at our expo connected them to the individuals who subsequently got them the contract. We actually recently had an event where Multicultural Affairs had hosted over 350 students over a 2-day weekend event, and they hired a diverse supplier, Chef Helene, and so we got feedback from both the chef as well as Multicultural Affairs, proving that our efforts are a step in the right direction in getting vendors the business, helping educate the suppliers on how to do business with LSU, and then the follow-up and how we make the program successful. And also in our slides, you have pictures. She provided pictures of the event. We also, as part of our procurement trainings, we host a supplier diversity training, which talks about the program and how Departments can shift their business processes to now include diverse suppliers, and we talk about the bid requirements as far as how we've amended the procedures to engage and include those diverse suppliers in the process. We also recently distributed the newsletter, which is included in your packet, to over or approximately 2,500 suppliers.
So in part of our collaboration efforts, I've actually had a meeting with several of the LSU affiliates. We shared our bid language, our policies and procedures, and talked to them about how they can include diverse suppliers in their database. We're sharing our suppliers with them so that they know who are diverse suppliers. TAF, for example, is going to be inviting all of their general contractors to be a part of our construction event so we can connect our subcontractors, our diverse supplier subcontractors, with those general contractors. So there's going to be a meet and greet opportunity with LSU facilities, general contractors, and other diverse construction suppliers at that event in January. So we're doing a lot of planning on that. Met with the health science centers to ensure that they have all of the reporting stuff that they need to, because we have not reported on health science centers numbers, to make sure that they understand how their commodities fit with ours for what is the spend that we're hoping to capture. Shared all of our policies and procedures. Dan has also sent out the policies and procedures in the bid language to all of the chancellors to ensure that all of that information is included in their bid documents, and they're changing their procedures to accommodate that. Met with Chandra Williams and Mike at Baton Rouge Chamber. I mentioned that earlier, hoping we can engage in that Minority Resource Center in North Baton Rouge. Tiffany's going to discuss some of the additional things that we have coming up.
And as Sally has mentioned, our upcoming activity obviously is this construction event. The purpose of it is to bring those general contractors and subcontractors in the same room as facility services, get them talking about the services that they need and how those vendors can fill those needs. We'll also do similar activities in the promotional and printing items categories, catering, as well as information technology. And as we move into more information technology, we're in the process of procuring a software, which, might I add, is from a diverse supplier, that will assist in the management of diverse supplier certifications. The Supplier I/O system is going to enable us to have accessibility to 1.6 million diverse suppliers, 7,500 of which are located in the state of Louisiana. The tool will provide a brief company overview, the supplier certifications and expiration dates, as well as certifying information that was provided from federal, national, regional, state, and local entities. In the next few slides, you'll see screenshots of the system where you would log in, see a brief overview of your supplier information in a database format or a dashboard format, and then it gives the vendor's profile information, which would also include their revenues, information about the company, their industry, as well as their certifications and the expiration dates, which are extremely important. To start, we're going to provide our profile of paid suppliers in addition to the LSU Health Science Center vendors so that they can cleanse our data and make sure that we have the most accurate information for those supplier certifications. We can invite suppliers to register in Supplier I/O, which will also give them the visibility to other companies that are sharing this system. The addition of new suppliers only enhances the tool and now allows us to share information among the 150 clients of Supplier IO. We get the ability to monitor those expiration dates and have accurate certification information. And with this tool at our disposal, we hope to now have a better direct line to the population of diverse suppliers so we can promote our activities and build our program.
And one thing to note on the supplier database, currently what we're doing in order to get information out about our events, our newsletter, et cetera, is we're sending it to the resource agencies who then send it to their membership. So we're sending it to the Hispanic Chamber, the Black Chamber, the New Orleans Chamber. And so that's a lot of work, and it doesn't really, we're not even sure when it goes out or how it goes out, that kind of thing. This will give us a direct line to suppliers. The one that was on the previous slide, 3 South isn't Louisiana Diverse Supplier, and that's actually what the record looks like. This software came to us from another, from Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's what they're using. Also, Exxon is using it, and Exxon is, as you all well know, a very good partner in the diverse community. So having more people that get into the database and put their suppliers in brings us, we can use their suppliers, they can use our suppliers, and it just gives more visibility because there isn't a master in the state for a diverse supplier database. Any questions?
Mr. Perry?
Thank you guys so much for your work. I think the chairman and I as past chair appreciate so much all of what you guys have been doing. It's been very important for us over this past year and a half. Down in the New Orleans area, to give you a couple of other suggestions, the Black Chamber is great. They're a member of ours, and we work with them all the time. Quentin Messer leads the New Orleans Business Alliance, and they have pulled together probably the most comprehensive list of suppliers of what we've, over the years is changed in all kinds of names, from set aside to disadvantaged business to minority business and so forth. Interestingly, the term of art that we're beginning to implement in New Orleans now is entrepreneurs of color. And so many companies are beginning to change the way that we look and reference documents. One of the things that we do each year, because some of our biggest customers are the NCAA, the NBA, and the NFL, we compile some of the most in-depth African-American-owned, Hispanic-owned company vendors that can supply because they are very aggressive, and of course, because of Essence Corporation. Essence is one of our biggest customers, and of course, they want to buy exclusively, if they can, from businesses that you would want to identify. So we've got ready-made lists and contacts that we can help y'all with. If you don't have my card, I'll give it to you, or Jason can give you all my contact information, and we would love to help get you connected to those
That would be great.
because we can get you a direct pipeline with the names of the company heads, their phone numbers, their emails, and all of that, because as you said, to make this work, you have to go beyond your normal comfort zone and directly connect with the companies and give them opportunities to be a part of the mainstream in this. So I'll be glad to help you. Let's touch base after, and we can get you some ready-made lists that are really good.
Great, thank you. It has been exciting to see the amount of excitement with the resource agencies when we're meeting with them, because they know that we can help bring some of these challenges and help fix them, for the diverse community. It has been very rewarding work.
Mr. Williams.
Hello. Thank y'all for the presentation. As you know, I remain very anxious to see this program gain steam. As every month, I continue to be disappointed by the pace of the project. Just as a reminder, and I'm not going to take up time and go through the whole story, but this grew out of the fact that when our athletics department master concessions contract was put out to bid, it had absolutely no requirement that any of that contract have any part of it where we recruit and develop women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, et cetera. We were talking about something on that scale. Nothing was put into that contract because the compromise, for lack of a better term, was this program would get off the ground. So this program is designed to impact things at the scale of the Master Athletic Concessions contract, the Charity Hospital Redevelopment Project, Nicholson Gateway. With all due respect, not a 5-figure contract that someone else is given to somebody who happened to come to one of our events. So I just want us to continue to move faster towards not just some of this, what we're doing, but some actual, tangible results on the scale we're talking about. I'm not sure from your presentation, I think you said I talked with these different departments and these foundations. I'm not sure where you left it. I haven't heard what the reporting requirement or recommendation is going to be. I don't know how you're going to follow up with them to make sure that they're keeping in compliance. I've heard from you before that you were having difficulty getting departments to adhere to the policies of doing business with disadvantaged businesses, even once you put the policies in place. What procedures are in place now to make sure those departments are listening to you? What is your plan for follow-up with the major construction and other projects going on around us to make sure it doesn't slip through the cracks? I don't want to be sitting up here 6 months from now with all these projects in the rearview mirror talking about outreach. So I would continue to urge, like I do every meeting, that we move forward. What is the timetable for filling the vacant position as the director of this program?
I met with HR, and they're doing some salary requirements with some of the candidates right now. And as soon as we can get that scheduled with everyone's schedule, so in the next, I would assume by January 1st at the latest, with the holidays coming, it may be mid-December.
Yeah, that's very disappointing. We have lost so much time with this kind of thing, and meanwhile the program is touting 5-figure contracts that someone else gave someone. Let's move forward more aggressively than we are moving right now. I was very glad to see during the audit committee meeting that they have put as a high priority audit, because I asked the audit committee chair, and he's graciously agreed to do it, to analyze what we're doing on campus in this area, because it just continues to be a great, great frustration for me. I'd like to see at the next update, I'd like to see 3 businesses come forward who have not done business with LSU, who could stand at that podium with you and say, thanks to the program that started really under Chairman Ballard and then Chairman Perry, they are now doing business with LSU in a major way. Is that something you all?
That's absolutely possible. And as far as the audit goes, I have met with the audit committee, not the audit, the auditors, on 3 occasions, and have provided them with all of the information that they needed about the program and the reporting. They just sent another list yesterday of additional information that they want. So I think what you'll see is that we do need someone to go out and start auditing the campus to ensure that they're following the rules with regard to complying with the requirements in the bid documents, et cetera. And so that may be helpful that they're going to be doing some of those test cases, because, you know, one person getting in trouble from the auditors will certainly help strengthen our case to get this job done. And we will bring at least 3 next time. We have several that have come forward, and certainly we'll take that for next time.
I'd like to ask some help from you in maybe forging a little bit different line on this. One of the things, I know Jimmy knows this very, very well, for people who have been committed to this as a practice over the years, when we're talking about the scale of the projects you're talking about, so it's not just like paper clips or this kind of contract, 2 of the hurdles that have had to be overcome that have been very hard for these emerging businesses are the capital requirements required in contract, in many of these contracts, and the bonding requirements. Maybe LSU could be, nobody solved this problem yet. Sure. maybe we could be a thought leader, because I think it's really kind of above the level of what they're doing. Maybe we could put together a team of people with experience in finance and banking and procurement on a broader scale to talk about how do we truly develop the capital resources and the bonding capacities. Jimmy, you know this. I mean, it's something we fought all the time because you get a group you think can do it, then they can't quite meet the capital requirements. They can't quite be able to execute the bonds. So,
And I think you're right. I mean, the nature of a historically disadvantaged business is that they're sort of behind the ball. But, however, there are plenty of businesses owned by women and minorities who can meet the requirements. And so I think they're not as readily apparent, maybe spread out, they're not as concentrated, but oftentimes it's just a matter of matching opportunity with a person who traditionally has not been welcome inside of the process. So I agree with you long term, and that I think the outreach things you're doing, and we probably need to get Blake and Jimmy and others who are familiar with this financing, and that's an outreach part of it that Sally's always talked about. But what I don't want to do is get hung up on outreach and not actually start doing business with folk, because there are folk out there that we can do business with right now, I think, anyway.
and it takes a proactive effort to get there, connect.
Outreach. I mean,
Right.
it takes something other than the 1.7% we were doing before we started this initiative.
Mr. Mallett?
If possible, do you know how many dollars y'all bid out since the last meeting? How many projects?
Pardon?
Do you happen to know how many projects you bid out since we started really pushing on this since the last meeting? And how many, if possible, do you know how many minorities or disadvantaged did get?
Off the top of my head,
know,
I mean, I can put that in the report next time. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't want to throw out numbers.
I think-
And I do know that we have a large contract right now that we're working on, so when we put out the bid, the language was in there that we want them to partner with a diverse supplier. They came back and they said, okay, here's our diverse supplier. What we did as part of our best and final offer was went back to that company and said, okay, you tell us exactly how you're going to use that diverse supplier. So then what they said and how they said they're going to use the diverse supplier, which is pretty significant, then we can use as part of the contract that they said they were going to do this in their bid, and we can hold them to it. So looking at ways that we can go back to them and do that. Now, that's a large contract that hasn't come before the board yet. We haven't finalized the contract, so.
I believe y'all are trying to do everything you can. Only thing I'd like to see every time y'all come to the board, it would be interesting to see how many contracts we're actually offering out there and what percentage of minorities from point to point, just to see, are we really moving forward? Are we getting any traction with it at all? I don't know. It's a question that I'm sitting here listening. It would be interesting to see, are we making some headway? And the only way would be a report from you, because you know how many contracts you're letting out, and you would know if we're making some headway. We're going to continue to work on the audit committee like James has asked, and I know y'all working diligently too. But at the same time, if we could see just, are we making some headway? Are we doing some good out there?
And we can bring that, next time. The audited financial statements were just completed, and we'll use that as the basis, because that's where we're taking the expenses from. And we'll show you, based on the spend, what we did additionally in this year compared to last year.
Well,
and we'll bring that.
From right now to the next time I see you. I would just like to see, are we really making any headway? What you said is good too. But the last time we talked about this at the last meeting, have we done any good since then? And the next meeting, I'm kind of short-term looking at it at the moment. I see the long-term picture too, but it would be interesting to me as a board member to see if we're making some headway.
Absolutely, bring that next.
I would also take advantage of Mr. Perry's recommendation about, he's already gone through this process in New Orleans and has a good list, and I think if we can expand our list for people that already qualify in this category, I think we ought to do that to make sure we've got the right people we're looking at that would qualify.
And just to add, our procurement team is here and provided just some information for this week, in which we are aware of 5 contracts that went out that are large contracts that had the requirements for diverse suppliers. So we are taking an active
How successful
initiative.
were there any of the,
They haven't been awarded yet.
Hadn't been awarded yet?
Right.
Okay, that's good. That was all.
But we are including the language.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is let's build into these future reports some metrics that show contracts that are going out and what success rates, how are we moving those needles? So, other questions?
Thank you.
All right, hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda, we have a student fee. It's kind of a reduction and a consolidation. Dan, if you would address this for us.
Yes, Mr. Shadlane, members of the board. This one action item is a request from LSU A&M to reduce the Gumbo yearbook fee by a total of $2, $1 in the fall, $1 in the spring, and then consolidate the student media-related fees into a single fee for flexibility purposes. With that, I would like to turn it over to Provost Haney, who worked very closely with student government on this request, and then we will also have a representative from student government.
Thank you very much. I first would just like to say what incredible partners our student leaders were in this process. A special thank you to President Lockett as well as Senator Green. And this is Jack Green, and he is a junior pursuing a double major in applied coastal environmental science and political science. He's from Lake Charles. He's a member of the Roger Hadfield Honors College, and he is also a member of the Louisiana Service and Leadership Program, as well as Feminists in Action. But he's most involved in student government, where he serves as currently the chair of the Committee on Campus Affairs and Sustainability. And I should also note that in the spring of 2018, he was awarded the National Udall Fellowship for his contributions to the LSU campus sustainability. And upon graduation, he hopes to pursue, and I have no doubt that he will, a master's in public policy and a combination law degree from the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. He's truly a stellar student and a stellar leader. And I had the opportunity to work with Senator Green as well as the Speaker of the Student Senate, Christina Black, whom you will have the opportunity to meet this afternoon, and Stuart Lockett as our student body president, in a series of meetings where the students are rightly looking at every fee that they pay and evaluating each one for efficiency and effectiveness. And in the spring of last year, the student government passed a series of resolutions about those fees, and we were working with them to address the concerns of the students and to ensure that we were being good partners with them. And this resolution is a result of those actions, as well as a vote of the student body in support of this. I should say that Senator Green was the co-chair of the Student Fee Valuation Assessment Committee, which was the committee the students formed specifically to address fees. That's a committee that their work is ongoing, and our work with them is ongoing. And so I invite Senator Green just to speak a little bit about this resolution and the work of the students.
Thank you very much. Like Provost said, my name is Jack Green. I was chair of this committee when it was formed in the spring of 2018. And as a result, I was the author of the resolutions when they were passed in the spring of 2018. So just a kind of little bit about the history and the purpose of the creating this committee was that students, particularly in student government, and what we have heard from our constituents, felt that in terms of required student fees, that we didn't have as much transparency and knowledge of them as we would like to. So we created the committee to look at public information from these fees, as well as request financial documents and meet with the administrators of fees that we decided to look at. The purpose of it really was just to kind of create a model for what I like to say, model for expectation of what we want to see with student fees, we really understand that since the state has cut a lot of funding to higher education, that it's on all of us to bear the brunt of some kind of fees and tuition to make up for it, but we wanted to ensure that the fees that we were spending were being spent judiciously and for all of the students with the dollar value in mind. So specifically, one of the fees that we looked at was the student media associated fees, and the compromise that we have come up with today with Provost Haney as well as student media is a consolidation of the student media associated fees and a reduction from $1 per semester of the gumbo fee. And the purposes for that is that a lot of what student media is receiving is going to different funding resources. So consolidating them will really free up their funding so that they can give however much they want to each resource, because the amounts specified on the fee bill aren't exactly what and how the fee is being spent. And the reduction of the gumbo fee was a result of the opinion of the committee and the student senate once we reviewed those fees. And so it's not necessarily to cut the entire yearbook, as we understand that there's a possibility that it may go online or other means of publishing that, but it was a result of kind of our opinion from the committee.
All right. Mr. Green, Mr. Lockett, thank you all for your leadership on this. Any questions?
I just want to congratulate you. I mean, it's not a vast sum of money, but it shows your mind in the store, and all of those among us that deal with public money. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing, and I congratulate you. And also because, and I suspect Mr. Mallett and Ms. Werner may agree, it's just a very typical, brilliant young person from Calcasieu Parish.
Thank you.
I concur.
I would also just like to echo Senator Green's comment that student media was a great partner with us, both Dean Martin Johnson from the School of Mass Communication, as well as John Frazier, who is the director of student media. They also were very supportive. They were at the student government meeting where this resolution was presented. And I also want to say thank you to Tommy Smith, who has been just terrific working with these students to provide them the information on the fees. I also want to echo Senator Green's comment that the students recognize that they're bearing a greater burden. They just want to ensure that when the students voted for these fees, there was a purpose and intent behind it, and that we are not straying from that purpose and that intent. And so, again, it was just a remarkable collaboration with these students, and one that is ongoing. They are continuing in a series of meetings to look at those events and to these fees, and I look forward to continuing to partner with them.
All right. Do I hear a motion to approve this
So moved.
action? Have a motion, second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you so much.
Senator Green, thank you for your leadership, and we really appreciate student government and working with us to get something done that needed to get done. And you're modernizing something that would have been left untouched, and we appreciate Stuart, your leadership, and your Senator Green. Thank you for working with us closely to get what needed to get done.
Thank you.
That concludes the business of this committee. If I would have a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Any opposition? If so, we're adjourned. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Woods, would you please convene the Property and Facilities Committee?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Drawdy, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Chatelain.
Here.
Mr. Damp.
Here.
Mr. Lockett.
Here.
Mr. Mallett.
Here.
Mr. Starnes.
Here.
Mr. Yarborough.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Now I ask Mr. Tony Lombardo to please present the items for the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Woods, members of the board. First item is a request from LSU Health Sciences Center, New Orleans, to approve execution of an amendment to the master hospital lease to remove the orange and brown parking areas from the master hospital lease. We make frequent adjustments smaller adjustments to this lease, but it does come before the board because it is the large hospital lease. You have all of the documentation. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? Is there a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
So moved. Second.
Without objection?
Mr. Woods, as this board's appointed representative serving on the UMC board, I'd like to recuse myself from voting on this item.
Duly noted. With the exception of Mr. Yarborough, the motion is adopted as presented. Next, Mr. Lombardo.
Item 2, request from LSU A&M to approve the schematic design of the Phi Kappa Psi Fraternity House. Phi Kappa Psi Fraternity House project is in the schematic design phase of development, with the accompanying exterior elevations prepared by Coleman Partners Architects. We have here today Mr. Gary Gilbert with Coleman in regards to this item.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Good day, Chair and the board. Thank you for an opportunity to present this. I'd first want to say how much we appreciate input from Mr. Lombardo, Mr. Mahaffey, Mr. Husser with the university as we've worked through the planning of this important project. This project is important to Phi Kappa Psi. It's critical to Phi Kappa Psi, and we believe very exciting for LSU and the larger campus. The three reasons, and I'll be brief, that we've undertaken this project is one, to abate and repair water intrusion into the house that's occurred over the last 40 years. The project was renovated in the 80s and has gone virtually untouched since that time. The methodology for doing that will be complete re-roofing, new skin, and miscellaneous site work in order to improve the drainage. That's goal one. Goal two is to provide for the increase in accommodations as the demand for heads-on beds at the house continues to increase. They currently they have 20 rooms. This expansion will increase that number to approximately 50. So we want to meet that demand. They have a growing pledge class, and we're very excited about that. The third goal of the project would be to increase the amenity, the technology, and the academic resources of the house itself. Technology needs to be updated. Current student demands require greater socializing spaces, and then certainly technology and study spaces, computer areas, and things like that, all of which weren't necessary when this building was built and aren't being provided at this time. So those three goals they're undertaking. We can achieve this, and we're doing so in the context of an overall improvement of the building to bring it more in line with what we believe and what the staff has indicated is more appropriate in terms of its location and prominent location on Fraternity and Sorority Row. I was instructed to be brief, and that's what I'm presenting. So if there's any questions,
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Motion to approve.
Been moved and second. Any objection? Without objection, motion is adopted. Next, Mr. Lombardo.
Tony, to truly appreciate the design of that building, I think next time just add a before and after picture. The before, you'll appreciate how nice that looks.
Item 3, request from LSU A&M to name the new clinical building at the LSU School of Veterinary Medicine, the Stevenson Pet Clinic. The LSU School of Veterinary Medicine wishes to acknowledge the Stevenson's generosity and name the new clinical building the Stevenson Pet Clinic in their honor.
Thank you. Are there any members of the Stevenson family here today, Mr. Lombardo?
Not that I'm aware of.
They are on campus, and they'll be at many. He has about. He told me he has about 27 meetings he has in the next 3 days. So they wanted to be here, but we'll be with them tomorrow morning, and certainly you'll see them at the game tomorrow.
That's a very significant contribution and gift to the university, so we certainly appreciate that. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
Moved. Second.
Second. Any objections? Hearing none. Adopted. I believe this completes our business, Mr. Chairman. Is there a motion to adjourn the committee?
So moved.
Second. No objections. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Woods. Mr. Starnes, would you please convene the Affiliated Organizations Oversight Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Drotti, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Starnes.
Here.
Mr. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Blossman.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Damp.
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Mallett.
Here.
Mr. Yarborough.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Drotti. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for creating this committee. I would note that this is the first meeting of this committee, and from my understanding, its design was to oversee some entities that fall under our purview that have not previously had the attention it deserved. Also, a separate committee called the Oversight Committee that is to be coterminous with our committee and oversee things that would fall through the cracks. Also, we would like to give our attention to, an example of which is developing procedures for evaluating personnel that we are called to evaluate as from our discussions, and some other things that we would need to give attention to. At this time, though, I think to find out what the affiliates are, I call on Mr. Lazell to present the agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Starnes, members of the board. This is, as you may be aware, we have gone through a fairly lengthy and rigorous process to review what's referred to as our Uniform Affiliation Agreement form, which is the formal document that the university confects with each of our affiliates that spells out the requirements of having an affiliation with the university. There was like I said, a very lengthy process over the past several months whereby our affiliates worked with the university to look at that form of agreement and make some necessary revisions based on some recommendations we had gotten from our internal audit folks as well as others in the past. So what we'll be doing today, we'll be giving you an overview not just of who those affiliates are, current affiliates, but what the recommended changes are to the affiliation agreement. We will not be asking for any action today. This is really for your information, especially as this is really the first time the committee has convened. But we will then be coming back at a future meeting, most likely in December, to ask for your favorable consideration of those changes, followed thereafter by the actual executed affiliation agreements coming back to the committee for review and approval. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Tyler Carney, who actually led the group that was responsible for getting us to where we are today with regard to the affiliation agreement.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As Dan mentioned, the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of proposed changes to the Uniform Affiliation Agreement that the university has with each of its recognized affiliates. Just to start with a little bit of background, the work that alumni associations, foundations, and other affiliates do on behalf of higher education institutions is actually recognized in state statute, and universities are encouraged to promote the activities of these organizations. At LSU, we have the Uniform Affiliation Agreement that outlines the relationship between the university and its affiliates and the roles and responsibilities and requirements that shape that relationship. The agreements were first signed in the late 90s, and the last time they were updated was 2009. We currently have 20 recognized affiliates that are all listed here on this slide. These are the organizations with which LSU has executed an affiliation agreement. There may be other organizations that currently don't have an affiliation agreement, but probably should. And as one of the next steps I'll mention at the end of the presentation, we'll be taking the necessary steps to execute new affiliation agreements with those organizations. So over a year ago, it was determined that the Uniform Affiliation Agreement needed to be reviewed. And so for the past several months, a group of representatives from university units as well as several of the current affiliates have been conducting this review. The primary objectives for the review were to make sure that the agreement recognizes and facilitates the work of the affiliates, that the agreement's compliance requirements are both transparent and sufficient from the university's standpoint, that best practices are represented in the agreement, and then finally the group was charged with drafting a permanent memorandum that would outline the university's process for creating new affiliates in the future. So the group wrapped up its initial review in the spring and distributed proposed revisions to the agreement to all of the affiliates as well as university stakeholders for feedback, and then that feedback's been incorporated into the proposed changes that we're discussing today. So moving to those proposed changes, the first change to highlight is the creation of a new annual compliance certificate. One of the challenges of the way the current agreement is written is that the compliance requirements are scattered throughout the document. So this new proposed annual compliance certificate would put all of the requirements into a single section, and it's sort of structured as a checklist to help both the university and the affiliates keep track of all the various elements. So each year the affiliates would submit this annual compliance certificate attesting that they have provided all of the necessary information to the university and that they continue to comply with all of the sections of the agreement. For example, that they continue to maintain and enforce all of their necessary policies like a conflict of interest policy. Some of the other items that are on the certificate are on the slide here. I should note that the requirements themselves are not necessarily new. They're in the current agreement, but the proposed compliance certificate is just a new mechanism that we thought made the requirements more transparent and more easily tracked, again, by both the university and the affiliates. Another proposed addition to the agreement is a requirement for the affiliates to engage an independent auditor to issue an agreed-upon procedures report focused on compliance with the UAA. So this would be in addition to or beyond the annual certification that the affiliates would be doing. It would include the independent auditors inspecting the internal controls of the affiliates and doing some tests for general compliance with the agreement. Here again, I want to note that while the current agreement doesn't require an agreed-upon procedures report, the agreements prior to the 2009 update did, so this is adding that requirement back into the agreement. Several of the other proposed changes are listed here on this slide. In general, the proposed changes attempt to consolidate like provisions so that they're more transparent and more easily referenced. So rather than being embedded throughout the document, all of the provisions related to prohibited transactions, for example, are consolidated into a separate exhibit for easy reference. Proposed language was added to stress that ensuring compliance is a shared responsibility between the university and its affiliates, not one or the other. In the proposed draft, there's a section where each affiliate will fill out a statement of purpose, and the thought is that those statements of purpose may reduce the risk of duplicating efforts in the future in the event that the creation of a new affiliate would be proposed. Language was also added that explicitly grants affiliates the right to use LSU marks. That permission is effectively being granted now, but we thought it appropriate to include in the agreement. There are a couple of proposed updates to the termination clause. In the termination for cause section of the agreement, the definition of cause has been expanded to include events like the transfer of a campus to a different management board, the elimination of a program, or any other event that, in the discretion of the university, may constitute cause. In that same section, language was added to reaffirm that donor intent would be followed in how funds are handled in the event that any of those scenarios would take place. In general, the group considered a lot of what-if scenarios, most of which are probably highly unlikely of occurring, but we wanted to make sure that they were addressed in the agreement. The executive vice president and CFO was identified as the university point of contact throughout the document, so the current version has different points of contact in different sections. So a simplified point of contact is cleaner and more efficient. And then finally, the concept of best practices has been incorporated into the expectation for affiliates' policies and procedures. And the group talked about the fact that best practices can and do change over time, so introducing this language will hopefully ensure that those policies and procedures are always up to date and not based on best practices from 10 years ago, for example. In terms of next steps, I mentioned the permanent memorandum that was drafted to outline the university's process for handling requests for new affiliates. We'll be finalizing that PM in the coming weeks. Dan mentioned the next step for the uniform affiliation agreement. The proposed language would be to bring it back to the board for approval. If approved, then we'd work with the current affiliates to execute new signed agreements with them. And we'd also work with those other organizations that operate as affiliates effectively now, but we currently don't have agreements with them. And we'd bring those back to the board for approval in the future as well. And then finally, Sally mentioned this earlier, but we'll continue to work with the affiliates on how they can best support and help us achieve our goals related to the supplier diversity program. And she mentioned they're already being engaged in that effort. So that's a quick overview of the proposed changes. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. I will say that when we do bring this back for approval, we'll have a more in-depth summary of some of the changes by section, and we'll include that with the item for your information.
I have a question again. You mentioned earlier about some organizations that maybe should be affiliated organizations have not assigned the uniform affiliation agreement. Do you have any idea how many of those there are?
There's probably 10 to 12, and they're largely small organizations that, to be fair, have probably just flown under the radar, but there are friends organizations that are small, but they do use LSU marks and LSU name, and probably fall under the category of affiliates.
And you're going to aggressively identify all of those, pursue the identity of them?
Yes, we've identified the ones that we know of, and they were actually, we distributed the draft language to them for feedback, so we included them on that distribution.
Do we have a centralized, I don't want to say database, but bank of that has all these agreements, these executed agreements from these organizations?
They are kept in the general counsel's office, yes.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I may have a question. On some of the ones that are not listed, is there any reason, back in '99 when this was put out and then revised, I guess in 2009, or was it '97 and 2007, whichever the dates were, did you send the information and they just not fill it out and sign on? Or they just were never sent the information, or is there any issues that surround that?
No,
you ought to be aware about resending it.
I suspect that, again, because of the size of those organizations and the little amount of risk that they introduced to the university, they probably weren't approached to sign uniform affiliation agreements.
Who determined that there was no risk?
No, I wouldn't. There certainly is a risk. They're using LSU marks, but the ones that don't have affiliation agreements now are largely the small ones.
On the affiliates that do have present contracts that aren't expired, if the board agrees to approve this, are we going to go back and revise that with them too?
Yes.
Okay. And on the issue of the audits, that you're requiring them to engage an independent accountant. Where does LSU's auditors come in if are we going to be allowed to to look into some of this stuff. I understand there's some issues about different, some of them don't want us to see who's involved in the operations or whatever you want to call it. But where is our auditors going to get involved for us to know, LSU to know what's going on? I mean, will the independent accountants that they hire meet with our auditors for a review once a year of some nature or something like that?
That's not in the agreement, so we will receive copies of the affiliates' their annual financial audit and then the agreed-upon procedures report. The one consideration in the agreement for small affiliates that so choose, they can allow internal audit to do those procedures for them if it's up to them.
But why would we not want our auditors to have at least a yearly review with their independent accountant, whoever that may be, just to review, just to make sure that LSU's protected? I'm just asking the question. It would seem proper that our auditors have an opportunity at least once a year. Okay, we're not opening their books, but we surely can talk to their accountants, auditor to auditor.
And we'll be getting those reports as part of the agreement, and I see no reason why we couldn't reach out to the auditors. And
I just want to make sure that LSU's protected and that our auditors our auditors work for us. These auditors work for, or these independent accounts are going to work for these affiliates, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just concerned that we're protected, and I would rather our people review it with them just to make sure. So that
Mr. Mallett, as you may recall, as a part of the process getting to this point, the auditors, Chad and his folks, expressed a set of concerns, and the compromise that was reached was that they would provide some criteria for use by the affiliated entities' auditors in preparing the annual reports. There's nothing that precludes.
And if we don't like the answers to the questions of the criteria we've asked, can we keep?
Yeah, there's no reason that our auditors can't meet with their auditors to go over that report at the end of the year.
So there'll be transparency.
Yeah, there will be transparency in that regard.
Is that part of a protocol that we can check that box and be sure that's done?
Yeah.
Yearly?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just a question. Tom, do we now require that in order to be an affiliate, that they're required to submit their annual audit reports and their 990s or not?
Yes.
They,
Yeah, the agreed-upon procedures report that's focused on the affiliation agreement would be new to this proposed language. But currently, yes, they're required to provide their annual financial audit, yes.
We're providing them with some additional procedures that we need to see, our auditors want to see in there in order to ensure that we get what we need without reaching the separation that's supposed to exist between LSU and an affiliated entity.
You know what might also be good to require? You know, the American Bar Association Committee on Nonprofit Best Practices recommended that nonprofits and affiliates in these rotate their auditing CPA firms every 3 years. In doing that, you keep a fresh set of eyes on the books. There's never a cozy relationship. I know I do that in my own company. I actually rotate and bid out with new auditors every 3 years, and it ensures to my board an absolute fresh look. And I think simply requiring those three things, audited financial statements, 990 form, that they have a proper best practice rotation of their audit, then I think we're in good shape, and it'll make it a lot easier for our guys to connect with them.
I totally agree with you, Steve.
I do too. And I know we're not asking for an action item today, but we would like to have a copy of the proposed uniform agreement with language that, favors transparency and protection of LSU so that we can digest it and go over the things that Mr. Perry and Mr. Mallett, which I think those are outstanding suggestions. And I would look for those things in the uniform agreement, the new uniform agreement, in time, in plenty of time before we're expected to approve it at the next meeting.
Sure, we can provide that.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Mr. Chairman, I think this concludes the business of the Affiliate Oversight Committee, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Not hearing any objection, the committee meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, and thank you for chairing this new but very important committee, Mr. Starnes. There is one committee left on our agenda, but we will, in the interest of time, we will handle that committee meeting after the lunch break. So we are going to recess now. We will return for the lunch break at 1 p.m., and at that time, we will ask Mr. Damp to convene the Legal Affairs Committee, which is the last committee meeting of the day.
But, Mr. Chairman, yeah, for the benefit of the audience, since I think that meeting will go into executive session, which may take a half hour or so, I wanted the audience to know that when we get back, there may be a delay.
It may or may not. I do expect a motion to go into executive session. Such a motion has not been made yet, so I couldn't pre-act on that in advance. But expecting that such a motion might come, we could very well go into executive.